Klaus Jurgens is a political analyst and joins us in the studio. Thank you so much for your time, Klaus. I'm going to start with a quiz question. You're not necessarily supposed to know the answer, but some exit polls have just been published. Those exit polls asked people, after they'd cast their ballots, which of these 5 issues is the number 1 issue for you? The issues were democracy, economy, abortion, immigration, or foreign policy. Which one do you think was number 1 for all of those?
Well, thanks for having me. It's going to be a historical night, I think. 5 issues. I would, if I may, narrow it down to 2. I would say democracy and the economy.
You're 100% right. It was democracy number 1, economy number 2.
Why did I say democracy? There are worries, of course, amongst the electorate. Where is our country headed? What kind of representation will we get according to who is actually sitting in the White House? And I can imagine that with all modesty and being neutral and objective here, a number of voters might say that the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris might promise slightly more democracy perhaps than her opponent because of the style he actually acts, the wording he uses, the topics he proposes. And the last couple of appearances were, I would say, erratic. Many people criticize the current president, Joe Biden, for having verbal blunders, if I may say. But Donald Trump used highly toxic language in some of his more recent appearances. And the one which really stands out, I think, to talk about the IQ, the low IQ of his opponent, Kamala Harris. Now, if wordings are translated into politics later on, you might come to this point, democracy. Secondly, the economy. I've did a bit of research, of course. Now we have economic growth of 3%.
Which is pretty good for OECD countries.
It's absolutely amazing. But then we have a government and a deficit 6% to GDP. Now, even if this is fine, government spending, creating jobs and employment, ultimately it is good for the economy. Middle-class voters might feel the pinch. It is very expensive, home ownership is very complicated, incomes are not skyrocketing, and in particular small and medium-sized enterprises, the typical heartland American family business and the farm management, the owners of agricultural businesses, they voiced their concern and they said, the rich are getting richer, and what about us? Where is this new economic miracle? And I think democracy, yes, but the economy might actually become the decisive swing factor very narrowly for Donald Trump, regardless of what I've just said.
Yes, regardless of its good performance.
Yes, yes. So, democracy and economy.
Well, you are completely right, Klaus, completely right. Okay, give us some more analysis once we've gone through some of the profiles of the 2 main candidates, because we know there's a third-party candidate who could become a disruptor. Let's just take you through a profile of Kamala Harris, first of all. Okay, well, we know she's the vice president. She represents the Democratic Party, and she is from California in Oakland. She celebrated her 60th birthday just 2 weeks ago. She's 18 years younger than Trump. But that's some way off the youngest presidential candidate in the US. That was JFK. He was elected at the age of 43. Harris is a lawyer. She became San Francisco's DA in 2004. She later earned a name for herself with her positions on criminal justice reform after having served as California's Attorney General. That was between 2011 and 2017. In 2017, Kamala Harris made her first leap into national politics. She was elected to the Senate, representing her home state. And if Harris were to win, she would make history, of course, as the first woman and person of both black and Indian origin to become president. Klaus, are you impressed by her? Think back to the start of her vice presidency. She was undoubtedly sidelined by the Biden administration. Her closest advisors went public and said she was very upset about it. She almost appeared to be an embarrassment. She was making gaffes. Do you think the Democratic Party believes they've got the best candidate?
Well, I would say some of her gaffes were actually hilarious. And there were actually TV stations basically mocking her public appearances. I I'm not saying I'm against a candidate or vice president constantly smiling into the cameras. Fair enough if that is her style. But I started to question, what about substance? You know, public appearance and looking nice and looking friendly instead of the opponent who is verbally shouting sometimes, very aggressive. And I would be the smiling candidate, laughing it all off, being good with the people, the lady from next door, basically. I don't think that in times of trouble, war, crisis in so many places around the world that this is enough actually to win an election. I might be proven wrong in a couple of hours. Now, all of her vice presidency, I thought, where is the political agenda? Where is the substance actually if one day she would decide, which then happened, to run and become president candidate? Where is the policy-making agenda? Yes, she says A and B and C, but was it a real manifesto? Was it a real catalogue of policy-making issues? Was it taking Donald Trump by the hand and saying, you say this, you say this, you say this, but I counter you. I have a better proposal, from the economy to foreign policy to what have you. And the key thing I think she did not really address enough is what Donald Trump managed to say, make America great again. Now, if this becomes a focal point for voters, besides the economy and besides democracy, and I was a little bit surprised that these 5 points didn't have a sixth one, the search for a national purpose. Now, many Americans are unhappy about the state of their nation. They don't know exactly where we are. Where does America stand? Is it tilting to the left, to the right? Are we still a global role model? Does the world respect us? Whatever we do, what is our purpose as Americans? And I think if she would have addressed that issue much more proactively, we would have a different situation. So this was basically point 6. So I'm not surprised that it took her some time to actually come up with a kind of agenda, but I still say it, according to me, only as an analyst, it was lacking a bit of substance.
Okay, Klaus, they're telling me to move on, but in the interest of balance, I just want to do the quick profile of Donald Trump and ask you about the former president. He is the former president, of course. He's from the Republican Party. He's 78 years old. The billionaire was born into money, according to the latest estimates by Forbes. Back in September, Trump was worth about $4 billion. He first attempted to run for president in 2000. That was under the banner of the Reform Party. It didn't go well. But then another 4 times, of course, as the Republicans' candidate. This, the latest one. And in 2016, he surprisingly became the 46th president, defeating Hillary Clinton. But he did lose the popular vote. He won the Electoral College, though. OK, just quickly, Klaus, because we have to go to Washington. The dangers of Trumpism becoming entrenched in the Republican Party. If Donald Trump wins this election, that's going to be a problem for the traditional Republican Party, correct?
Yes, I think so too. I think Donald Trump is overdoing it. Not only what we mentioned, the verbal warmongering, no. I think he would become actually a liability, if not he already has. Many traditional voters in the heartland are actually worried about the reputation of the Republican Party and whether Donald Trump is really the best business card or whether he should not tone down and become more diplomatic in his actions and in his wordings. Now, you mentioned Donald Trump's history. I believe it was in 1985 or 1986, he penned a book, The Art of the Deal. This became a vital, basically a must-read, even if he didn't write it himself.
Correct, I was going to say
with
that.
ghostwriters.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to have a businessman who at that time already had here and there some doubts, is he doing everything correctly with the New York City? But ultimately he became a role model for a self-made man. I can do it. If you want to achieve something, you go into business, you are American and you can do it. Many people looked up to him despite his dealings in the financial world and city councils, which were perhaps not always correct. Now, in his presidency, unfortunately, he didn't manage to achieve the same goal. he was not the president for all of America. He tilted to the right. Some would say to the far right. And I think this was absolutely wrong. A traditional Republican voter would say, we are democratic, we are democracy loving, we are conservative, but we are not extreme right. So I think some in the party will not be very happy.
It's easy to be self-made when your father lends you $1 million, though, Klaus. Thank you very much indeed.